Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Second Chronicles chapters 10 through 20 in our continuing study of the Old Testament historical books. We pick up chapter 10, that's going to be right after Solomon's death, and we see the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, just as we saw when we looked at Second Kings after the death of Solomon. It's going to tell essentially the same story. His foolish actions are going to lead to the division of the nation of Israel into the north. And we're going to talk about the northern kingdom of Israel, that is the northern 10 tribes. They'll follow after Jeroboam, and then the southern tribe of Judah, with sometimes some folks from Benjamin and also the Levites. They're going to follow. They're going to stay faithful to Rehoboam. Um, Now, in First Kings, when we saw that story take place, it attributed it, at least in part, to the unfaithfulness of Solomon. Remember how he took on foreign wives and he worshipped some of the gods of those wives. Second Chronicles isn't denying that, but it just doesn't mention that as a reason. It lays the blame securely on Rehoboam and his actions, where he does not listen to their request for a tax cut, and instead he gets bullheaded, and they say, well, in that case, we're going to leave, and they do. Next, we have the invasion of Israel, because Rehoboam, he's ready to go back, and the north has seceded from the south. That's a little bit different if you're in the United States. You're used to our history being a little bit different. Well, here the north had seceded from the south, and Rehoboam is ready to go and get them back. And a prophet, Shemaiah, says, "Don't do that. You guys are brothers, and God has allowed this to happen. So just leave it separate." And Judah is told, don't go invade Israel. Don't go try to bring them back. And so they don't. Next, we see a list of fortified cities built by Rehoboam, where he is, now that half his country, more than half, has left, he's trying to shore up what remains. And then we see the priests and Levites migrating to Judah, because in the northern kingdom, with Jeroboam is in charge of the northern kingdom, and he's afraid that as Israelites go down to Jerusalem to worship, that they might see all this anti-Jeroboam propaganda, and so what does he institutes two other places of worship instead of Jerusalem, and he's going to put one of them way up in the north at Dan. That's as far north as you can go and still be in Israel. And the other one is going to be just before you cross over into Jerusalem. You'll be in Bethel, so just a few miles to the north of Jerusalem. And he has these two other places of worship with a golden calf. After all, it was good enough for Aaron back in his day. And so a golden calf in each one, not to separate pagan gods, at least so he says, but just as an alternate way of worshiping God, which, let me just say for the record, don't do that. That's called idolatry. So don't engage in idolatry. Don't use images as a way to try to worship the Lord. Next, we have a list of Rehoboam's sons, and they are given fortified cities. So we had a list of fortified cities built by Rehoboam, and now his sons are given these cities. Then we have the invasion of Judah by an outside king, and this time it's Shishak. He's king of Egypt, and a prophecy is given just about this again. This is something that God is bringing about. And then finally, we come to the end of Rehoboam's reign, and we have a line that says he was at war continually with Jeroboam. It's sort of on again, off again. Remember, there was no invasion, but they're not friendly. And so the parting, the parting of this country, the splitting of the country of Israel into north and south, is not going to easily be rectified. It's going to remain, as seen by that continual war. So, Second Chronicles chapter 13, verse 1, in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, Abijah, he's the son of Rehoboam, Abijah becomes king over Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Micaiah, the daughter of Uriel and Gibeah. And notice again, just in case you forgot, there was war between Abijah and Jeroboam. So there's this continuation of the conflict, It wasn't all Rehoboam's fault. Even when he's dead and his son has taken over, the conflict continues. And so there continues to be war between the north and the south. Chapter 13 then starts off with Abijah becoming king, tells us of his mother and her family, the daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. You say, wait a minute, Gibeah, isn't that the city from which King Saul had come? Yes, it is. Isn't that a Benjamite city? Yes, it is. That's why I said that the southern kingdom of Judah is going to be just the tribe of Judah, but Benjamin's going to be in there as well, as seen by Abijah's mother. Next, there is warfare with Jeroboam, mentioned it's just a couple verses. And now we're finding out that Israel outnumbers Judah. The numbers are given, and Israel's numbers for the soldiers that they have are double that of Judah. After all, they have double or more than double the land mass. And so a bigger land area can support more soldiers. And so Israel, as a rule, is going to be bigger than little tiny Judah. Now we have Abijah's speech to Jeroboam and to all Israel. He talks about how Israel has set up an unholy priesthood to what are not gods. That's actually true. That's accurate. That's a fair judgment, a fair assessment. That was wrong. That's not saying that they shouldn't have been different countries anymore, but that's a correct judgment. He goes on to say, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. And so he sees Judah as being faithful, and Israel because of its idolatry, and that was idolatry. Even if you're trying to worship God, if you're doing it in the wrong way, you're doing it using images and idols, that's idolatry. And so he says, don't fight against the Lord because you will lose. And so now we have a warfare, sure enough, taking place between the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom led by Jeroboam, northern kingdom of Israel. And Israel surrounds the kingdom of Judah. Not hard to do. It's not all that big. Judah's not all that big, but Judah wins the battle. And so Abijah's speech turns out to be more or less prophetic. And so at the end, we read that Abijah became powerful, took 14 wives. That's supposed to be a sign of his power. He had 22 sons and 16 daughters. We're not going to worry about a next son that will have to survive. No, he's got plenty to choose from. Chapter 14, verse 1, so Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and his son Asa became king in his place. The land was undisturbed for 10 years during his days. That's good. 10 years of peace is good. Verses 2 through 4, Asa did good and right in the sight of the Lord his God, for he removed the foreign altars and high places. So this is all good stuff. Tore down the sacred pillars, cut down the asherim. These are, holy place, but not in Jerusalem. These are outside holy, like a holy tree or some sort of holy pillar or something. And commanded Judah to seek the Lord God of their fathers and to observe the law and the commandment. Now we look at Asa's reign, starting in chapters 14 and going to chapter 16. Right at the outset, we just saw he's commended for doing right in the sight of the Lord. The religious renewal takes place. They put away the foreign altars. They put away the pagan idols. There's a time of peace. There's a time of rest. Everything is going good, at least at first. And now we have, after 10 years, an invasion by Zerah of Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is way, way down. You go southern Egypt, and not necessarily corresponding exactly to modern Ethiopia, but still in that area south of Egypt. And Zerah comes with an army of 1,000,000 men. We've never read about that anywhere. That's a huge army. And Asa turns to the Lord, and that's a giant army, but the Lord is victorious. And so Asa wins a victory. And now Azariah, the prophet, comes and warns Asa to remain faithful. He has I guess he's taking that to heart. He has a great gathering of all the tribes to worship in Jerusalem. And now there's a long time of peace. So we had 10 years of peace. And now a long time sounds longer than 10 years, so another long time of peace. But now we're going to have another invasion after that long time. And this time it is by Baasha of the northern kingdom of Israel. You say, what happened to Jeroboam? Jeroboam, not only did he die, but his whole line was taken out. So his family had gone down a few generations, but now he is out and a new dynasty is there, signified by Baasha of Israel. And what they do is they're not going to make it all the way to Jerusalem. They're going to fortify Ramah to blockade Judah. They're going to try to keep Judah from going out, and that was considered an act of war. It's not like he's invading, but he's and now Asa turns to Ben-Hadad of Aram. Ben-Hadad is the king of Aram. Aram is what we call modern day Syria. And instead of turning to the Lord like he had previously, he turns to his own devices. He turns to Aram and asks them for help. He wasn't supposed to be doing that. And so he's rebuked by the seer Hanani for trusting in Aram. And Asa puts Hanani into prison because he doesn't like his prophecy. Again, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to listen to the prophets, not imprison them if they're politically incorrect. And as a result, Asa becomes diseased in his feet. But again, instead of seeking the Lord, instead of repenting and turning to the Lord, he seeks physicians for help. He goes to his doctors. Let me just say, it's okay to go to your doctors. I would go to God first, or at least at the same time. But Asa has been having a problem lately of trusting in the Lord. He started off trusting in the Lord, maybe because he felt like he had no one else to turn to. Um, Let me just say, trusting in the Lord is always a good thing. Um, and sometimes the Lord will bring us where we have no one else to turn to. That's not bad. That's actually good because then we'll turn to the Lord. Maybe the problem is when we have other options and we start trusting in our wallet or our bank account or some friend of ours. And those things aren't necessarily bad unless they're causing us not to trust in the Lord. So, a lesson from Asa, actually two lessons: trust in the Lord at all times, but also you can start good and maybe not end up as good. And so it's important to start good, but also to end well as well. Chapter 17, verse 1, now we have Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa. Jehoshaphat, his son, then became king in his place and made his position over Israel firm. Now Jehoshaphat, you say, wait a second, is he son, over Israel? Yes. Even though he's not ruling Israel, he is going to solidify his military so that if it's him against Israel, he's going to come out on top. Verse 2, he placed troops in all the fortified cities of Judah, because he's from Judah, and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim, which Asa, his father, had captured. Now, Ephraim is actually in the northern kingdom of Israel. As you go north from Judah, you pass the territory of Benjamin, but that's actually part of Judah. Remember, we had one of the queen mothers from Gibeah. So even though it's Benjamin, they're more associated, I think, with the southern kingdom of Judah. And the next tribe you get to is Ephraim, which is a big tribe. They're like the leader of the tribes. And yet there were portions of Ephraim as well that had been captured now by Judah. So Judah is actually coming up in its strength. Verse 3, the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he followed the example of his father David's earlier days. Now, I don't think that's just earlier days than Jehoshaphat. That would be sort of redundant. But maybe David's earlier days when David first became king. I'm not sure about this, but think about David's earlier days and some of his later days. David didn't do quite so well. Remember his episode with Bathsheba, which isn't being mentioned, but maybe that is a subtle, quiet hint that the writer hasn't forgotten about that, and he assumes maybe you haven't either, even though he hasn't talked about that. In Jehoshaphat's case, he didn't follow that later example of David, but his earlier days, and did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father, followed his commandments, and did not act as Israel did. Israel had gone off the rails, not worshiping pagan gods, but they'd gone off the rails, worshiping God in a improper way, setting up the temples and the golden calves in Dan and in Bethel. And so notice Jehoshaphat doesn't do that. Verse 5, so the Lord established the kingdom in his control, and all Judah brought tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. Verse 7, then in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his officials, Ben-Hail, Obadiah, that's not the same Obadiah as the prophet later on that we're going to read about, Zechariah, it's also not the same Zechariah as the one who wrote the book Zechariah, Nethanel, and Micaiah to teach the cities of Judah. And with them the Levites, Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zebediah, Asahel, Shemiramoth, Jehonathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tobadonijah. The Levites. Boy, let me just say, their names are a tongueful. And with them, El Shammah and Jehoram the priests. So he's sending officials, priests, Levites, and they're all going down to the various peoples to teach them. What are they going to teach them? They're going to teach them the law. They're going to teach them how to worship the Lord and how to live before him. So they taught in Judah, having the book of the law of the Lord with them, and they went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught among the people. You want the people to be faithful? Teach them. We try to do the same thing today. So chapter 18, verse 1, now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor, and he allied himself by marriage with Ahab. So far, everything we've read about Jehoshaphat has been good. This maybe isn't the best of things. You say, well, wait a second, marriage, isn't that a good thing? Marriage by itself can be a good thing, depending on who you're marrying. He's allying himself with Ahab, who himself had allied himself with a Phoenician king by the name of Ethbaal. So remember the story. We've talked about this in previous classes when we were looking at the kings. We had the king of Israel, Omri, and then later on his son Ahab entered into an alliance with the Phoenicians. And they did this by Ahab marrying a Phoenician princess, Jezebel. And when they married, Jezebel came not just with dad's blessing, but also with dad's pagan prophets and the pagan gods, Baal, and pagan practices. And they brought that now into Israel. And here is Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa. He is doing the same thing. He's going to enter into a marital alliance. He doesn't get married. He has his son marry the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, Athaliah, and that means that she's part Phoenician, and she comes with, maybe with the gods of the Phoenicians, with the Baalim, that's how you say it in plural, the Baals. And so that's going to be an issue. And now that issue is not just in Israel, but now that issue is coming over into Judah as well. And so Ahab, king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, will you go with me against Ramoth Gilead? And so here's the call. Jehoshaphat speaking to, Ahab speaking to Jehoshaphat. Will you go with me to this border city, Ramoth Gilead? Now, whenever you see Gilead, Gilead is always on the east side of the Jordan River. But this is way on the east side. This is like out there we might think of it as disputed areas. Is it within the territory of Israel or is it within the territory of Damascus? And the reason they're going there is because it had been disputed. And so Jehoshaphat answers, well, I am as you are and my people as your people, and we will be with you in the battle. So they've got a military alliance, and now they're going to sort of put this to use by going out and fighting against this city, which I'm not sure how the people in the city felt, but you've got on the other side, you've got Damascus. So it's really a fight against Damascus. And so 1 Kings chapter 22 tells the story. Here we're seeing the story told again. So here's our outline of chapter 18. We already saw where Jehoshaphat allies himself, foolishly as it turns out, with Ahab. Verses 2 and 3, Jehoshaphat and Ahab agree to go to battle against Ramoth Gilead. And now as the action picks up, they have false prophets who are going to come and give their prophecies about how the battle's going to go. And they predict, they're led by a chief of the false prophets, Zedekiah, and they all predict a victory for Israel. In fact, Zedekiah gets into the mood, and he gets some horns, makes him look a little bit like a bull, and he acts out the part of a bull, and he goes attacking things, and he says, "Look, just like a bull, we're going to impale those nasty old folks at Ramoth Gilead. We're going to win big." And Jehoshaphat's watching all of this, and he says, "Well, that's all very nice. Can we hear maybe from a prophet of the Lord? You know, we're hearing these prophets of Baal and of this wrong religious system that has been set up in the northern kingdom of Israel. How about if we check with the Lord? Don't you have any prophets from the Lord?" And Ahab says, "Well, yes, we do. There's Micaiah, but he always says nasty things about me, and so I don't like to hear from him." "Well, you don't have any other prophets from the Lord, so why don't we hear what he has to say?" And they go to get Micaiah, and Zedekiah, the head of the false prophets, he actually warns Micaiah, "Look, we want you to say all the politically correct things. So you get on board with us, and you say everything that we're saying, and just lip sync with us." And Micaiah says, "Oh, you just want me to be politically correct? Okay." And he comes in and he just echoes what they have to say. He tells them what they want to hear. "You're going to win a battle, and it's going to be wonderful." Wink, wink. Um, and Jehoshaphat says, "Well, no, we actually want you to tell us what the Lord has to say." Uh, and Micaiah says, "Oh, you want the truth? Well, if you want the truth, you're going to lose the battle. You're going to be defeated." Um, and then he explains. He gives this description of how God was in heaven, and knowing that they didn't want the truth, he says, "Who wants to go down and tell them what they want to hear? Do I have any volunteers?" And a deceiving spirit was sent. Now, I'm not saying that was necessarily demonic. I don't know. But God had allowed to go, had given permission for this deceiving spirit, and that had showed up, which means that those false prophets actually had a spirit that was telling them this stuff. But it was a deceiving spirit because they wanted to give the politically correct answer. And so Micaiah says this, and Zedekiah, the false prophet, slaps Micaiah. "How dare you insult us? How dare you?" And now Ahab, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, orders Micaiah's arrest and orders that he be fed the bread of affliction. Now I'm not sure what that is. Was that like nasty rotten bread, or does that mean he's being tortured? Whatever it is, it's not pleasant, and he's going to be kept under arrest. And Ahab says, "I'm going to keep you there until I get back." And Micaiah says, "If I get back, then I was a false prophet because you're not coming back." And sure enough, they go into battle, and Jehoshaphat and Ahab are going to lose. Spoiler alert. Ahab actually puts on the uniform of a common soldier. He figures, well, just in case either the enemy or even God have it out for me, I'm going to sort of disguise myself as if you can disguise yourself from God. And so they go to Ramoth Gilead, and in the battle, somebody randomly shoots an arrow. They're not aiming necessarily at Ahab, but it's just a stray arrow, and it hits Ahab and it kills him, and so he dies. And now we read of Jehoshaphat. He is rebuked now for having allied himself with Ahab. The good news is that he escapes. He comes back. So our story picks up in chapter 19, verse 4. "So Jehoshaphat lived in Jerusalem and went out again among the people from Beersheba to the hill country of Ephraim." That is Beersheba way down in the south, as far as south as you can go, still be in Judah, all the way up to not just to Jerusalem or to the area of Benjamin, but to the hill country of Ephraim. That's even a little further north, and brought them back to the Lord. So by his extending his borders, he extends the number of people who are coming back to the Lord, the God of their fathers. Notice he appointed judges in the land, in all the fortified cities of Judah, city by city. He said to the judges, "Consider what you are doing, for you do not judge for man, but for the Lord." So judges in the cities, that wasn't always a given. Remember, you could have injustice going on, and nobody that was passing judgment, no one that was giving a righteous judgment. And so he says to these judges that he's appointed, "Look, you're not just going to do judgment for whoever pays you the best, whoever gives you a nice bribe. You do not judge for man, but for the Lord, who is with you when you render judgment. Now then, let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Be very careful what you do, for the Lord our God will have no part in unrighteousness or partiality or the taking of a bribe. That's just letting you know that the bribing of judges, that's not a new thing. That was an old thing. And so we come now to chapter 20, where three nations now are going to invade Judah. And they are going to come from Edom and Moab and also Ammon. And they are teaming up, and Jehoshaphat is afraid. In fact, he's very afraid. And so he calls for a fast and for all Judah to assemble before the Lord. And he's going to lead the people in a prayer of deliverance. We're actually given the prayer, it's quite extensive, as he prays with the people, leading them. Lord, save us, because we've got three nations against us, and they're coming up from the south, and they're sort of sweeping around the Dead Sea and coming up from the south in the soft underbelly of the kingdom of Judah. And so they pray, and we read that Jahaziel, the Levite, calls for them to believe. And he says, now you guys don't be afraid, because the Lord is with you. And they hear his, it reminds me a little bit of Joshua, be strong and courageous, a little bit of that. And Jehoshaphat and all the people, they bow and worship. And basically it's a giant worship service as they're coming before the Lord and trusting in him and worshiping him and depending upon what he's going to do. And so Jehoshaphat gathers the army, and they're going to go southward to the wilderness of Tekoa. And he actually appoints priests to lead the army in worship. So he's got the army, but instead of being on the front lines, the priests are sent up to the front lines, not to be hurt, because they're not quite ready to attack yet. And the job of the priests is to lead the army in worship, and they're going to praise God, and they're going to sing before the Lord, and they're going to pray before the Lord, and they're all doing this as the enemy army, not one army, but three enemy armies are arranging themselves to just wipe out the kingdom of Judah. And as they're worshiping and praising and praying, these three armies that are out before them begin to fight among themselves. And they start fighting each other, and they destroy each other. While Jehoshaphat and the people and the priests and the Levites are all out there worshiping the Lord, they're watching the Lord deliver them. And the way he delivers them, he causes them to fight each other until there's no one left. And they look at that and they say, wow, isn't that cool? By the way, there's a prophecy later on, much later, in the book of Joel chapter 3, that talks about deliverance coming in the valley of Jehoshaphat. You say, what's the valley of Jehoshaphat? Well, there is no valley that we know of that's called the valley of Jehoshaphat. I think it's what's happening right here. I think this is the quote unquote valley of Jehoshaphat, where God causes his enemies to fight among themselves, and they fight each other to extinction. And I think Joel is saying, yeah, it's going to happen again. Wait for it. Watch for it. And that's Joel chapter 3. All right, so for 3 days, Judah is out picking up the spoils of war. And now it reminds me when my friend Warren Gage likes to say, whenever you see 3 days, look for Jesus. And it reminds me of how, think about this, the leaders of the Israelites and the local leader of the Romans, Pontius Pilate, the leader of the Israelites, people like Caiaphas and Annas, and even Herod Antipas, all gathered together to attack God's chosen one, his holy one. And what happened 3 days later? He rose from the grave and showed himself victorious. Well, here for 3 days, Judah's picking up the spoils of war, the spoils of their devastation. And Jehoshaphat and his army, after 3 days, they return. And they're still praising the Lord. And the other nations see this, and they're going, whoa, that God that they have must be really something else. And they're fearing the Lord, which is what we're all supposed to do. Back in chapter 19, we had had Jehoshaphat rebuked for having allied himself with Ahab. That resulted in the Battle of Ramoth Gilead, which Ahab died, but Jehoshaphat, he survived it. Now we have Jehoshaphat rebuked for having allied himself with Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, and that's going to lead to a shipbuilding issue at Ezion Geber, where they're going to build some ships. And I've commented before, the Jews weren't all that good at building ships, and so when they do that, it's not going to turn out well. Those ships are going to crash. If you're going to have somebody build ships, make sure Phoenicians do it. They're just better at that. The big lesson from this, to quote Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 and 15, do not be bound together with unbelievers. That's what Jehoshaphat had done. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? Or what harmony has Christ with Belial? Or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? And so binding yourself, whether in I'm going to say whether in ministry or in marriage or in something, that commits you, can get you into trouble. Learn a lesson from Jehoshaphat.